Let's start here. At the beginning of the 20th century, Europe looked stable on paper. If you glance at this map, you see powerful empires with defined borders, functioning governments, industrial economies, and advanced rail networks connecting major cities. But here is what most people miss. These empires were not unified nation-states. They were multi-ethnic political structures holding together different languages, religions, and national identities under one ruling authority. Austria-Hungary governed Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, Slovaks, Croats, Serbs, and more. Russia ruled over Poles, Ukrainians, Finns, and various Caucasian groups. The Ottoman Empire still held territory in southeastern Europe, so while the map looks clean, the internal political reality was tense. Add to that industrial arms competition. Expanding rail networks built for rapid troop movement, conscription systems capable of mobilizing millions. Europe was stable, but it was armed, and that combination matters. Now let's move to Vienna. After the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in June 1914, Austria-Hungary did not immediately declare war. That's important. Inside the imperial government, there were debates. Some officials argued for restraint. They feared Russian intervention. They worried that a war with Serbia could escalate beyond control. Others believed the empire was already weakening. They feared that if Serbia continued promoting Slavic nationalism, Austria-Hungary's internal unity would erode further. The key issue was credibility. If Vienna failed to respond forcefully, it would look weak, not just to Serbia, but to its own minority populations. So the question was not simply revenge, it was survival. This is where things become technical. Austria-Hungary drafted an ultimatum to Serbia. It contained demands that went beyond normal diplomatic practice, including allowing Austrian officials to operate inside Serbian territory. Now, Serbia actually accepted most of the demands, but not all. And Austria had written the document knowing that full acceptance was unlikely. The ultimatum was designed to justify action. This wasn't chaos. It was calculated escalation. Austria did not act alone. Before issuing the ultimatum, Vienna sought support from Germany. Germany's leadership offered what historians call the blank check, unconditional backing, even if the crisis led to wider war. Why? Because Germany feared encirclement. France to the west, Russia to the east, both allied. German leaders believed that if war was inevitable, it was better to fight sooner rather than later, before Russia fully modernized its military. This wasn't emotional, it was strategic calculation. Now look at the Balkans. Serbia had grown stronger after the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913. It had expanded territory and influence. Russia saw Serbia as a Slavic ally and a foothold in the region. Austria saw Serbia as a destabilizing force encouraging nationalism inside its own borders. So this was not just about one assassination, it was about regional balance. The Balkans had already experienced repeated crises in the decade before 1914. Each time, Europe stepped back from war. That history created overconfidence. Leaders believed this crisis would also be contained. They were wrong. Now we enter the turning point: Russian mobilization. Russia faced a dilemma. It could not easily mobilize only against Austria. Its railway schedules and military planning were structured for general mobilization against both Austria and Germany. Partial mobilization was technically difficult and strategically risky. So once Russia began preparing troops, Germany interpreted that as preparation for war. Here is the critical point. In 1914, mobilization was not symbolic. It was mechanical. Railways were scheduled, units assigned, timetables fixed. Once started, it was almost impossible to stop without chaos. Military systems were faster than diplomacy. Germany now activated its own war plan, the Schlieffen Plan. This plan required rapid mobilization and a swift strike against France before Russia could fully deploy. The entire strategy depended on speed. Delaying mobilization meant losing the advantage. So even while diplomats were still talking, railway networks were already moving troops. At this stage, events were driven by timetables, not speeches. Inside Berlin, civilian leaders and military commanders were aligned on one reality. If Russia mobilizes, Germany must respond immediately. There was no flexible option built into the war plan. The structure of military preparation removed political room to maneuver. Once mobilization began, war became procedural, not emotional, procedural. France now prepared as well. French strategy was defensive in principle, but bound by alliance obligations to Russia. If Germany declared war on Russia, France was expected to engage. France did not initiate escalation, but it could not remain neutral. Alliance systems eliminated isolation. Germany's plan required passage through Belgium to reach France quickly. Belgium was neutral under international treaty. Germany knew this. But military planners believed violating Belgian neutrality was necessary for victory. This decision triggered Britain. Because Britain had guaranteed Belgian neutrality since 1839, Britain did not immediately rush into war. Inside the cabinet, there was serious division. Some ministers opposed involvement in a continental war. Others argued that if Germany dominated Europe, Britain's security would be threatened. The invasion of Belgium tipped the balance, not automatically, but decisively. When German troops crossed into Belgium, the crisis transformed into general war. Declarations followed rapidly. Austria versus Serbia had become Germany versus Russia, Germany versus France, Britain versus Germany. The escalation was now irreversible. And remember, this did not happen in isolation. Moroccan crisis, Bosnian annexation, Balkan wars. Each prior confrontation hardened alliances and deepened mistrust. By 1914, leaders expected conflict eventually. The system was primed. The alliance system meant that local conflicts activated broader commitments. Security became collective, but collective security also meant collective war. No state wanted to appear unreliable, so each acted to preserve credibility, and credibility, in this context, meant military action. The crucial thing to understand is this: there was no single mastermind controlling events. Decisions were made in separate capitals. Each government acted based on limited information and worst-case assumptions. Communication was slow, suspicion was high, timetables were rigid, the system outpaced the diplomats. By early August 1914, Europe was at war. What began as a regional confrontation had triggered alliance obligations, mobilization mechanics, strategic planning doctrines, and political calculations. The war did not begin because Europe was chaotic. It began because Europe was organized for war and structured in a way that made de-escalation extremely difficult once the process began. And that is the uncomfortable truth. The First World War was not an accident. It was the result of decisions made inside a rigid system.